Welcome back to another exciting episode of Aaron's Opinion, the podcast for blind people where we talk about critical issues in the blindness community. I'm Aaron Richmond. Tonight, like all other episodes, is of course copywritten by me, Aaron Richmond, and Aaron's Opinion. Thank you. You can watch us right here on YouTube, where so many of you do, along with listening on iTunes or anywhere else you get a podcast. Aaron's Opinion 6 at gmail.com. 1-240-681-9869. Don't forget to comment below, follow on Facebook and Twitter. Even consider becoming a patron on my Patreon. We appreciate the support. This evening, we are joined by Tiago from a company called Podcast Overhaul. We're glad you're here. Guys, this is something that I came across, Podcast Overhaul. I came across the company. Um, I don't know, maybe month ago or so. So I forget everything that you, or I forget a lot of what you do. I have a feeling that you involve helping podcasts. So why don't you get into it? Introduce yourself, tell us how you got into this, and then just dive into Podcast Overhaul.
Sure, absolutely.
Go
Well,
ahead.
Aaron, firstly, I appreciate you having me on, and thank you for taking the opportunity. And secondly, what a cool show! So blind podcaster, everything for the blind community. I think that's really cool and really really great. So wanted to give you some kudos for that.
I appreciate
Um,
it. After you complete this episode, you'll be added to my private group and you'll be able to talk to all the guests all over the world. You'll be able to meet a lot of characters from all over
well,
the world.
that is a privilege. I truly appreciate that. I love that. See, this is why I do it. This is why I do it. It's the interaction.
I actually that's really why I do it too, is just to have these great conversations and to educate the world. It's always positive. So yeah, podcast overhaul. What is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. So, Podcast Overhaul started out really as a podcast brand, really just designed to help podcasters, either podcast fans, podcast listeners, and ultimately those who make and create their own podcasters or make their own podcasts, as well as aspiring podcasters, right? And then slowly it developed into a podcast, a website, and now a podcast app where not only you can listen to your favorite podcast, discover new podcasts, things of that nature, but there's also a community tab which takes you over to our website, provides you resources to our podcast called Podcast Overhaul, obviously. Providing hints, tips, strategies, podcasting guides, resources, anything that we can do to help podcasters either with exposure for their own podcast or more technical things like sound and video and all kinds of other little tidbits where we can assist. So we don't claim to be experts, but we claim to just kind of put our heads together and we try to help out where we can.
Well, after all, as I say on my show, it's not this isn't a show. The everything we're saying is our opinions. So you guys
Right.
you could add that into your website. You could say nothing I'm telling you is a fact, but all of it are my opinions.
That,
And
that's
I
that's
and
exactly it.
and
Yeah,
I think that really helps people. I think that helps people to feel welcomed and to feel that they can relate to you as a podcaster or company or whatever whoever however you fit into the whole equation.
for sure.
Well, that's really interesting. So okay. But what was the original idea behind Podcast Overhaul? In other words, what was the, catalyst for getting it started in the first place?
So really, it was about creating a platform because we are podcasters, as well. And so what we would do is we would in this podcast space, it's become so commercialized and it's become so big and so um, convoluted. I guess we were just really trying to find a podcast space for ourselves, and then and there's Facebook groups and there's Twitter and stuff like that, but we just didn't feel like there was anything that was really available for the small podcaster or the indie podcaster or someone who wants an opportunity. Like picture, let's say you have a podcast and you're really just trying to get out there and you're really just trying to, get some listeners or get an interaction. That can be really tough if you're a small independent podcaster. Maybe you don't know how to start out. Maybe you are having trouble finding, a platform or a resource. That's kind of where Podcast Overhaul stemmed from, because we were looking and we were like, well, this is kind of, not as friendly or as user friendly, or as convenient as we would like it to be. Like maybe there should be a Twitter page or Instagram page or somewhere where we could just head out there and say, hey, I need some help, or hey, I'd like my podcast to have a little more exposure, or hey, I like this. So that's what we wanted. And instead of trying to find it, we just said, well, why don't we just create it? Like, let's just try it. And thus came Podcast Overhaul. And here it is. And, we hope that it's been helpful to the people that we've been able to interact with so far.
Really good. Yeah, I completely see what you're saying. When I started out here at Aaron's Opinion, it was called something else when I started it. And I got into podcasting because, well, for one thing, my day job is a teacher, and I educate people all day online. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts in the blindness community. And if you do not know, that's totally fine. But there are podcasts out there that are basically geared towards an audience of blind people and are oftentimes produced by blind people. And I was listening to those,
Hmm.
and they were great podcasts. But I noticed one thing: they were not approachable, as you said. They were not. They were just too big and just too. There was a kind of a. They were just too distant. And I said, well,
Right.
since
Hmm.
I have so many opinions and since I want to help people, why don't I start talking to myself? That's
Right.
basically what podcasting is. And then I started
Pretty
doing it.
much.
And I discovered over a period of time that by helping others, answer their questions about life, or answer their questions about, how to go through university, how to approach this topic, that topic, those people became my listeners. So the one thing I tell anyone who wants to know: podcasting, number one, it's not for everyone. Number two, it can be for you if you only remember three things: your audience, your audience, and your audience. And if you really nail that down, if you really focus on who you're talking to, then I find that more and more people have an interest, or at least it seems like they do, might be my
Hmm.
opinion, in what I have to say. So
For
I
sure.
think the art of it is quite easy. And I think that for me, it's very interesting that you find that a lot of people are telling you that they're kind of intimidated by it. Guys, don't be afraid. Just push record, Don't
Right.
don't don't worry who's listening to you. Because the other suspicion that I have, and I'm only giving my opinion, and it's only a suspicion, that I think the people that are at the top of the charts on YouTube or iTunes or
Hmm.
Spotify or wherever you listen, I you know I think it's basically a similar concept to the pyramid of knowledge, where basically you have a couple people at the top who are kind of in charge and kind of have the most influence, but then you have a lot of great people, who are below on different levels of the pyramid, still producing
For
great
sure.
content,
Hmm.
still producing great content, but not reaching the audience, and then feeling discouraged, right? And then they never, and
Correct.
then they never keep publishing. Guys, you got to keep publishing
For
your
sure.
episodes. If you, you know, I mean, I say that on one hand. I mean, if you feel like you're producing quality content, if you're giving your opinions or
Hmm.
informed facts, that's what people clearly want.
For
So
sure.
don't be intimidated by the people at the top, because I don't I'm not I don't compete with them. And by the way, I'm not going to catch up. So I'm not
Right.
I'm
Right.
not concerned with the top of the pyramid. I'm
That is
concerned
true.
I'm concerned tonight with helping Tiago, right? Other nights I might be
Absolutely.
more concerned with helping other people. But if you just help one, you'd be surprised. The views do
Absolutely.
go up. Yeah. So an interesting question: have people come to you, Tiago, and said, Tiago, podcast overhaul, I want to start a podcast, but I'm just too shy? Or has someone said, I want to start a podcast, but I don't have the audience yet? Have you actually heard that from people?
Yeah, we've heard different questions along those lines. We've heard, hey, like, I want to start a podcast, but I don't really know where to begin. Or, hey, I want to start a podcast, but I have like this issue, like, how do I really record, or how do I get that? They say that podcasty sound, and how do I, all these little questions, or sometimes I get questions like, hey, like, hey, this is my podcast. Can you listen to it? Like, are there things that I can improve on and things of that nature? And again, like you said, it's all opinions. And so we give our opinion on it. We might say, hey, your audio is a little low, or, we think maybe you could improve on this, or maybe the name of your podcast or is this, but your topics are concerning this. Maybe you can do that. Maybe you could change that up. Right? You're kind of confusing your audience, stuff like that. But we do firmly believe at the end of the day, right? Your podcast is what you make of it, and there are no rules to this thing, right? I mean, podcasting in our opinion is a lot like blogging. The way blogging started out, it's just, hey, I want to write about something. I want to write about my opinion, or I want to write about my day. I want to write about sports. I want to write about whatever interests me, right? And then I'm going to write about it. It doesn't have to be grammatically perfect, right? It doesn't have to have all these nuances, it could be whatever I want. And that's what blogging was. And then it became commercialized. And that's like, this is how you write the perfect blog. But in a way, podcasting is kind of the same thing, where it was like, hey, let me podcast about this. Let me podcast about whatever I want. And then next thing you know, podcasting became commercialized, heavily commercialized around 2018. And that's when it was like, well, this is how you podcast, or this is how you're supposed to do it. And we just don't believe that. We don't believe that there's a specific way that you should do it. But if there are areas where we can help out, where we do, where some things we know about, like audio and, different interfaces and microphone recommendations and stuff like that, we're happy to lend a hand. And that's what we're here to do.
Perfect. So good. So with all of these different things that you do, are you going to eventually work towards becoming a hosting service for podcasters?
It's definitely something we've contemplated. We want to move slowly at this point. So right now we just launched the app in, I want to say, like 2 weeks ago now, and that's doing really well as a player. So we kind of want to see how that goes and the reception there, and it's been really good. And we want to give podcasters an opportunity to apply to have their podcast featured, stuff like that. After we gauge that, hosting may be something that we may want to look into, because at the same point in time, you do have kind of the big major hosts out there. Not many of them are very free, which is understandable. But hopefully that will be something. It will be a goal in the future for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we want to provide that opportunity.
Sure thing, sure thing. Yeah, I use Anchor. Anchor is perfectly good and free, and it does everything I needed to do. It puts me on iTunes, so, and
Right.
everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I get listeners from countries that I don't even know who they are. So guys in all those countries that I see on my chart, you guys should comment below, because I would love to know who is that less than 1% of person that 1% of
Right.
the 1% of less than 1% of the audience in like, what was it? Like
Right.
a country that I've never even featured, like Vietnam. Okay, like, I mean, I've had people here from Australia, New Zealand, but never
Yeah.
Vietnam. Or I've had an
You never know. Who's that guy in Seoul, Korea, that just decided to listen to what I was, like, who knows? It's really interesting.
and those are the audience members that are the most powerful, the silent ones, the ones that watch secretly sneak into my analytics as less than 1% of the audience.
For sure.
When you think that I don't just check the flags once in a while, not because I'm counting the flags, but because I'm just out of simple curiosity. I just want to know what parts of the world are aware of my show. Yeah, or like the other weird one was like Colombia, like less than 1%. I don't know anyone in Colombia though. Like,
Right.
unless it's someone with a Colombian SIM card in a phone traveling all over the world, and the software still thinks they're in Colombia, which that can also be possible.
It's a
So
possibility. The internet's a strange place. Technology's really changed the way we look at things.
so I guess, I mean, I've had the conversation with others, but so yeah, how do you like with your own podcast? How do you look or gauge the analytics or not? I guess.
So there are a number of ways to do it. PodTrack is definitely one analytics measurement that I recommend. Chartable also has an analytics interface that we feel is pretty good. Obviously, um, a lot of hosting sites have their own analytics. I know Anchor has their own, and Red Circle. SoundCloud, others, they do have their own analytics. We feel that PodTrack is pretty accurate because not only does it count listens per se, but it counts downloads. And those two are, you would think they're the same thing, but they're not necessarily synonymous, right?
I agree. Can you please remind the audience if they don't know? I can imagine what they are, but please remind us what is the difference between a listen and a download, or a play and a download? That's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. So with a podcast play, it's pretty much like, let's say that someone just goes out there and, you know, I mean, basically hits play, right? I mean, they go over there and they listen to your podcast, right? Let's say that they listen to it on um, SoundCloud, or they listen to it on, you know, Apple Podcasts, or whatever they want to do, right? They hit play, and that would be considered a play. A download is different. So a lot of podcast apps may download a podcast automatically, or they may, when you hit play on the episode, usually on Apple or something like that, you could hit that little cloud, and that will actually download, right, the episode. So you could theoretically have, you know, let's say a user downloads your episode and they listen to it 3 times, right? So that's one download but 3 listens. So
Right.
it's that's the way it should be. So sometimes whenever users, or whenever podcasters are looking at their analytics, they're like, "Hey, I had 1,000 listens, so I had 1,000 downloads, right?" Well, no,
Nope.
not necessarily, not necessarily. And so it's something that, if you're a numbers person, it would definitely be something to keep in mind, just so you know where your numbers are and understanding where your downloads are. If sponsorships, or reaching out, if that's your goal, but if not, hey, listens, downloads, whatever you want.
Right, right. No, it is interesting. Or the other funny one with my chart is I get the platform list where it shows like all the like Apple and all that stuff.
Right.
Well, but then it says, get this, 59%, or 60%, let's say, other. Well, I would love to know what the other is. So I guess I'm
Yeah.
guessing logically other means that they went to other websites and downloaded maybe, or found it on through other means, or maybe other people were giving them the audio, the episode, and they were playing it kind of on an external method. Is That's
Hmm.
how I imagine it, I guess. But if
Yeah, quite possibly, or it could just be different. It could be where the podcast analytics does they don't know where the RSS feed is being pulled from. So, for example, I know with us with Podcast Overhaul, we're such a new app that let's say that you listen to Aaron's opinions on Podcast Overhaul, that analytic would track as other, because your podcast analytic website does not know that we are Podcast Overhaul. They just know that we're pulling your RSS feed.
that's what I imagined. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what can you tell us about the process that someone would go through to basically apply to have their podcast featured on Podcast Overhaul?
Sure. It's really simple. All you would have to do is head over to our website. There is a section right on the homepage that says "Apply to be featured," and it's a couple of steps, 3-step process. All you have to do is follow us on Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is our social media platform of choice. We love Twitter. We think it's just significantly better than Instagram or Facebook in terms of interaction with people. So we really like that. But yeah, so follow us on Instagram or Twitter. And then if you have Podcast Overhaul, if you have an Android device, you can find your own podcast and provide us with that share link, so that way we can find your podcast on our app, and then you would basically tweet that out on Twitter, and basically just let everyone know, hey, my podcast is available on Podcast Overhaul, and tag us in it. So once we see that tweet, and once you submit that form over to us, we will get a hit on our server. We'll take a look at it. We'll review your podcast along with the other submissions, and if it matches the criteria, and if we feel that it's good for our podcast curation team, we'll feature it and we'll let you know. So That it's really simple. 2-step, 3-step process. And we'll provide a banner image for you too. So if you don't have a banner image, some people are really good with that, like they're artsy and they have like a whole design for their podcast. That's great. Provide it. If not, we'll design one for you. So we'll make it look um, real professional for you.
Cool, cool, good to know. Yeah, I mean, I'm not terribly into the art stuff, because most of the people listening to us are blind. So, I mean, I have
Does
usable
make sense.
vision. I have usable vision. So, and also, although this is on YouTube, I make it a point where I don't necessarily want people to worry too much about what I look like. I'm on YouTube now because I figured it out and discovered that people like to see what I look like and people like to see me talking and they like to put the face, behind the voice.
Right.
But actually, I find that they don't. My listeners or my audience doesn't necessarily need the bells and whistles and the art, because simply if you're a blind person, you go to podcasts where you agree with it's about the content. But
For
i
sure.
i but I agree with you. Yeah, there are some strange, like, arts that I've seen around the community. I mean, I don't know what they're called. Obviously I'm not going to say who they are, but there are some,
Hmm.
like kind of unusual ones where you can tell, like, yeah, this person's not really concerned with art at all. Or other times you look at the graphic and it's like, yeah, they have someone on their team who on purpose designed a really good graphic for them. So
Correct.
it
Correct.
kind of can look cool. It definitely looks cool when done properly, for sure. Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Or maybe let's just say hypothetically, maybe if someday in the future, if you have Aaron's opinion on podcast overhaul, let's say maybe you could, I don't know, like, give my profile image thing kind of a facelift, like the main, like, yeah, my graphic thing. Maybe you could give that a little. I don't know, but I don't
Hey,
know though.
yeah, for sure. You never
Yeah,
know.
but
Yeah.
I don't know that, because I totally get it, but then again, I'm not sure. I guess I would ask, how many people out there, guys, how many of you would listen to a podcast just because you like the art? That would be the question. What do you think about that? What's the correlation?
Yeah, that would be interesting. You'd be surprised. Some people just like, hey, that looks really interesting. Tap, and it might be a terrible podcast, but they listen to
Yeah,
it because the podcast art looked interesting, right?
maybe, or just because the podcast art is interesting, that doesn't make the content bad or good, or the other
For
way
sure.
around. You could have terrible art and then say great stuff on,
Exactly.
on, on purpose.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
that could be very powerful, to have kind of a nondescript piece of artwork, and then you have a very small and powerful people that follow, that
that's
are that
right.
are that are loyal listeners. Yeah.
Moral of the story: don't judge a podcast by its cover, right?
Yeah, or that, or if you're, yeah, definitely don't judge by its cover. Just take a play, and a lot of these episodes, especially in the beginning, or if you go back, guys, to my channel on YouTube, where I was recording well over a year ago, you'll notice the progression of the show. I wasn't necessarily recording for as long, or maybe it wasn't, I don't know, as well thought out or as put together, as it is now. So the other thing is, I think when you're a podcaster, you just have to keep practicing this over and over and over again, over a period of time, until you become completely comfortable doing it.
For sure.
But it's not, if you want to do it, you can't do it overnight. I promise you that. It's not going to happen overnight. It never does.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, yeah. So, speaking of the importance of the global community of podcasting, which is by far the most fascinating part, how we have people watching, probably all over the world. So do you have customers overseas, or is it just people in the United States who have, kind of noticed podcast overhaul?
Yeah, I'd say a majority U.S., but yeah, we've definitely had some interactions from different areas. Let's say we got some in the UK, some in South Africa, some in Australia, South
Mm-hmm.
Korea,
Mm-hmm.
um, Nigeria. So yeah, there's kind of a healthy Canada. So there's a pretty healthy group.
Yeah, yeah, I get Australia too. I think a lot of people, it seems like certain parts of the world seem to like to listen a little bit more than others, but maybe
For
not.
sure. It's
I,
really growing over there. Actually, it's really
yeah, I've
growing over there.
noticed it. Well, I've had several of them on. At the moment, it was a while back. I forget when I recorded. I know I've recorded with several Australians, and then there's a lot of foreigners who live in Australia who are also podcasters. So that,
Right.
that helps too. But yeah, South Africa, I've reached out a couple of times. I've never seen much from South Africa. Um,
I'd say like Cape Town, Johannesburg, Pretoria area. There's a lot of like colleges and college students and stuff like that, which typically listen to podcasts or are podcasters themselves.
so good, so good. What has been the most unexpected challenge Podcast Overhaul has successfully overcome?
Ooh, it was probably launching this app. I,
And
yeah.
by the way, you've said this a couple of times, and it's not entirely clear. So by app, do you mean app on the App Store, or do you mean like just sort of a website that you can sort of turn into an app? Like,
No, no, app on the Google Play Store. So right now it's available on Android only. We're working on an iOS version for the App Store. But
hmm.
yeah, but we definitely coded and developed this app for release.
And why did you, just out of curiosity, why for Android? Why did you start on the Android side and then work outwards to Apple?
So honestly, we really enjoy Android devices, and with a lot of the applications on Android, like the functionality is really, really good, really great, right? The UI and the interface is usually not the same in terms of what we notice. And so we wanted to reach out and start with Android and the Google Play Store and that platform, and
Hmm.
then you know develop that and put our focus on that, and then reach out to the App Store because you know a large majority of people in the United States, they have Apple, they love Apple, that's great, and we'll get around to that. But we really wanted to focus on our Android users.
Yeah, yeah. Funny you mention it because I was speaking with another podcaster, actually not a podcaster, a guy from India, and he develops he's a CEO of a company over there, and he also started with Android. It seems like a lot of developers like to start the project on the Android end and then eventually get it up to the Apple side. That's just fascinating to me because I find that so many more people, but by the way, many people in the blindness community are only iOS users, or we have some
hmm
Android people at home, but most would be iOS.
For sure, for
So
sure. And
that's very.
partly, and that's
Mhm.
partly because of convenience too. Like I
Yeah,
will say from a developer aspect, because you know, not that Apple's difficult per se, but they do have a lot of hoops to jump through. I will say that. So
sure,
we're
sure.
we're we're working on iOS development, but they definitely there's definitely a few more hoops to jump through than I would say with the Google Play.
I see, I see. Well, okay, very good. Um, so, and what goes on your community page? You said there's a community section. What types of interactions do you have over there?
So as of right now, it's relatively really simple. Actually, we have the link to our app for obviously, or not our app, our podcast. So that way, if people want to listen to podcast tips, hints, resources, they could listen to the podcast overhaul app. We have obviously the link to our website, which takes you to our blog, and you can read about different microphone recommendations. You can get access to our how to start a podcast guide for aspiring podcasters, or people are like, hey, maybe I can give this a shot. Um, and then obviously we have links to our social media where we'll post hints and tips, and we also just also get access and answer any questions that we can on social media.
Excellent, good, really good. Do you ever host? Do you ever go live on your page on Facebook? Do you ever host like Zoom meetings?
Not at this time. Everything that we've done so far has been pretty. I don't want to say script. Scheduled. I'd say scheduled. So, yeah, everything's pretty scheduled, polished. But hopefully one day we'll get to a point where we can maybe do some kind of live event or something like that. I think that would be really cool.
Hmm. Yeah, I find those can be when planned out, those can be a lot of fun. Um, and things like that. Well, what is your ultimate goal for podcast overhaul?
You know, I don't really know.
That's
You know,
fair. Good. That fine. You know what? If you know what, if and I really appreciate that. So if you're podcasting and you don't know, just say, "Hey, I don't know yet," or it's perfectly acceptable.
for
Sure.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
The goal, I believe, at the end of the day, hopefully
Mm-hmm.
create something that someone else in the podcasting world can enjoy. And that's our
Right.
goal really at the end of the day.
It's kind of why I started Aaron's opinion, just simply to be able to help people and to do the right thing and to use the art of communication and education and podcasting to be able to be helpful like that. I completely agree. Yeah.
For sure.
Mhm. And what are you doing when you are not on podcast overhaul?
When I'm not on podcast
Just
overhaul,
curious.
yeah,
Hmm.
hey, I'm working. So I also have a day job, as many podcasters do, as a consultant, um, and so I do that, on the daytime, and then I also work independently on podcast overhaul with a couple other members of our team, developer and marketing guy. So we're a small team, um, but we really enjoy it.
Awesome. But hey, by the way, don't forget those other team members are welcome here on this podcast. Anytime they want to come on, they are more than welcome to guest with me. And just remember that I strive to be the most open and welcoming podcaster on iTunes. So
Absolutely, I appreciate it. I will definitely have to let them know that. I tend to be the voice behind this thing, so hopefully they'll start coming
it's
behind
all right.
and
Well,
being a voice too.
some of those shy people, they got to get their confidence up.
Let them know.
If you
Yeah,
really want to get into podcasting, you got to come over here and practice.
I'm gonna tell them no.
Just
I'll be
have.
like, look, Aaron said that you got to come out here, so we'll see what they.
We're gonna have some great conversations with them for sure, for sure. That is so good. Um, so and a lot of people, especially blind, but anyone might ask. So, how much does it cost, by the way, to join Podcast Overhaul?
Zilch, zero, nada.
Really? Okay. Well,
Free,
great. Well, great. Well,
100%
that's
free.
great. Yeah.
We want to keep it that way. Now obviously, we do put a lot of resources into it. If you'd like to support the app or the brand in any way, we do have a Patreon page. But honestly, we want to keep it 100% free for
Oh,
everyone.
cool. So does Aaron's. Oh, that reminds me of my Patreon page. So we have one over here, just like mine. That's cool,
There you
man.
go.
I thought
Yeah.
I was the first. I thought I was the first one on that thing. I didn't know other people had Patreon.
I'm like,
That's
yeah,
use.
we figure we're like, I guess we should start one of, just to
They're
just to throw it out
useful.
there.
I think no. In all seriousness, I think it's a really kind way to ask for help. I find it to be very appropriate. Let me just ask you. I have no idea what the answer is, and I don't know if you even have this answer either. But one of my other guests a couple nights back was wondering. Again, he created some sort of an app, some sort of a mobile app. When I produce the episode, you can listen to it, of course. But he wants to know. He was asking, can someone use Patreon who is not a content creator, but they want to use Patreon just to like get funding for their app or their project? And I wasn't entirely sure. I told
Hmm.
him, well, sign up and try it. See what happens. But what do you think?
I have no idea, to
Me
be
neither.
honest.
Me
Yeah.
neither. Yeah.
I'd have
I
to
told
look
him
at the Patreon
terms
policy
of
pages.
terms
Yeah,
of
terms and
use. I guess.
conditions, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I just told him. I told him I don't know, but try it. Couldn't hurt. I guess.
It
Give it
can't
a.
hurt at all. You never know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I've never heard of it being used that way. But then again, SoundCloud is not really for podcasting, but you can use it as a podcasting tool. You can kind of
For
podcast
sure.
on it.
Yeah. You can
SoundCloud
use it
is
as a
more,
platform for that too. Yeah.
yeah, you
Hmm.
can kind of you can kind of springboard from SoundCloud, but SoundCloud is more for artists and singing and musicians
Correct.
and
Hmm.
but then they do have an audio section. So yeah, well, good.
Yeah,
Well,
they're trying to expand too, so we'll
I
see.
wouldn't be at all surprised if they get into hosting. we wouldn't be at all surprised if we see that from them because they
Oh
have
yeah,
a.
no, I think they already have it, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
They do have. Yeah, but I don't know if they do it for podcasts. Well, anyway, yeah, it's all very interesting for sure. And you've been a great guest. You've done a magnificent job uh, educating me, educating the audience about podcast overhaul. I'm sure that some of my guests who, or some of my listeners who are Android users will be very interested. So, by the way, how can they get in touch with you personally if they have questions?
absolutely. So, any questions or concerns, just head over to our website at podcastoverhaul.com, hit the contact us, and feel free to submit any inquiry, and that will head over to our team. And you can also hit us up on social media at Podcast Overhaul on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
I always like to ask this one last great question. I've had a great time here. This is perfectly good episode as far as I'm concerned, or it's my opinion. But I always like to ask every guest if you can ask me only one question to see if I'm really worth my salt to really make me sweat. What question do you want to ask me?
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. One question. Hmm. That is incredibly interesting. Okay.
Don't be nervous. Don't be all shy out there.
Let's see. Okay. Do you put mayo on both sides of the bread?
That's interesting you ask. It depends on the meal. Sometimes I have a little bit on there, just a little dab. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't put it on
Oh,
both sides of the bread. It's a very interesting personality
you're
question.
a one sider. Interesting.
I
Interesting.
get. What about you?
I'm a two sider.
A two-sider.
I'm a
Whoa.
two sider. Yeah.
I see. I see. And outside of that, what's your favorite food?
Oh man, honestly, man, I've been eating a lot of. I guess sushi right now. Yeah,
Sushi.
for sure. Yeah, I eat
Okay.
a lot of sushi lately. It's delicious.
Well, my favorite food is gnocchi. Not that anyone
Oh
cares or
yeah.
wants to know. But
No,
yeah,
that's
I don't know. That's just it's the weirdest thing, but that is just literally my favorite food. But then again, I eat every country's food, every food from all over. I've traveled all over the world, so I'll eat any food from.
that's wonderful. I'm telling you, gnocchi with like a braised short rib doesn't get any better than
Okay, you don't even have to tell me. Or gnocchi
that.
gnocchi and pesto sauce.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That's so good.
Absolutely.
So good.
Absolutely.
Or the other good one that my brother loves. My brother could have been a professional chef. He's one of these people that's just gifted. He just loves being a chef in our house. And he makes some stuff that's so good. I keep telling you, you should make a gnocchi frite where you take gnocchi,
Hmm.
pesto sauce, and then get some French fries, and lay the layer of French fries on top with the gnocchi on the bottom. Wow, I'm gonna have to try. You guys should. Somebody out there in the audience should try that meal and tell us how it is. So
I'm saying absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
so there you go. We start talking about podcast overhauls, and then in the end, we're gonna go eat some dinner, which I've already eaten. Right? Well, you've done a magnificent job. As I say to you, I wish you the very best of health. I wish the world the very best of health. And thanks so much for listening, guys. And thank you so much from Podcast Overhaul. Tremendously appreciate it. You are always welcome on Aaron's Opinion, as the rest of your team is. And take care, stay safe, everybody. And as we say on this podcast, help one person today, help 1 million people tomorrow.